Okay, so we're going to make a start. Welcome, everybody. We are back for the second part of systems and processes, how you organize behind the scenes and in front of the clients to run a really superb client experience through the design process. So we're looking at all the systems and processes of the residential interior designer. I am going to share a presentation to take you through that. So bear with me. So hopefully you can see that. Can I ask, we have got Q&A at the end. I won't be able to deliver and keep an eye on the chat. So please, if you've got any questions, I'd love to deal with them at the end of the presentation. In the meantime, if you could leave yourself on mute, I would appreciate that so that we don't have other conversations coming through in the background. So this is Systems and Processes Part 2. The earlier first half is on my YouTube channel, was recorded, and that is at Julia Begbie on YouTube, where you'll find all of the past webinars that we've run for the Hot House group. So I just wanted to remind you of what was in presentation one, because we are continuing on in the same vein. We started presentation one by thinking about how emotional an interior design project is for the client, and how, if we think about it, we can actually predict, mostly on average, the arc of emotions through the project. So we could actually tie what we believe to be the client's likely emotional state to the support that we're giving the client at exactly that point in the process. So this systems and processes piece that I've built also tries to make those connections through to the client's emotional journey. And with that in mind, I developed something I call the intent framework. And the intent framework, we'll have a look at it quickly, is basically what your intention is for each of the set piece, the big pieces that you're going to deliver to the client when they're landing, and exactly what they need to do at the point that they land. We then have had a look through the first half of the design process, systems and processes, and that covered 5 out of 9 big packs that typically that interior designers would share with their clients in the duration of a project. Last time, I also stopped for a bit to discuss a possible fork in our approach to proposing fees, something I'm seeing more of, and I'll just cover that again in a second. And then I talked about my new program, which is starting in September, which basically pulls all of this together, and I'll just come back to that again slightly at the end of the presentation. So the introduction last week, your systems are not your back office. They actually are your business. And I was saying to a designer just recently that, I wasn't set on fire at the prospect of delivering this part of Hothouse's year. But actually, having got down under the bonnet, I'm finding systems and processes really sexy. They're a real opportunity. And when we struggle with managing our clients and managing the design process, they are what makes the difference. So they really, they can be a really meaningful role of your business. So we spoke about the intent framework. We spoke about the emotional arc of the design process, when we can theoretically try to track where we think the client's going to be in terms of, how anxious or how euphoric they're feeling at any one point. And we also are able, therefore, to pin the purpose of each of our packs going out to the clients. Just exactly what is it that we need this pack to do at the point in the design process that it lands? Do we need to sell? Is this largely primarily a selling pack, something to persuade the client, something that acts on their desire or their decision making? Or is it anchoring? Is this more of a legal type of document, or something that is making a note to the formal record at the point that it's being presented? Is it about informing and educating our clients so that they're able to participate to the best of their abilities in the activity that we're currently engaged in? Or is it about managing the client? Is it about keeping everything on track and making sure that the client feels supported, has their questions answered, but also is behaving in the best interests of the project as we go along? So we identified four purposes, and we discovered that management actually comes in four different flavors. So there's managing the client's expectations, making sure that we over deliver versus what the client is expecting, managing change, which I'll talk about a little bit more today, because actually part of the emotional journey of the client can be handling the loss of what was before. And we need, if we're awake to that, again, we can avoid some of the worst outcomes that we might see in an interior design project. Managing their decision making, helping them to make decisions, to feel less anxious, to feel confident to make decisions, and helping them see that, a decision needs to be made at this moment. And then managing our relationship with the client is the fourth flavor of client management. So we have this emotional arc that we can chart from our own experience. We know where the highs and lows come, and we can actually map onto that the main packs that we're going to be sharing with our clients during the design process. And we can actually begin to read how the client's going to be feeling at the point that the pack lands. And that can help us with our intention, with our decisions about what that pack needs to do. And I said last week, or in the last presentation, that I feel like each one of these packs is a different staff member. And I've recruited according to the personality that is needed for that pack. So I would have someone with a particular personality to handle the fee proposal, but I might have somebody else to handle, I don't know, an actual design presentation. So we perhaps want different personalities coming through these different packs according to the different moments that they arrive. So as we look at the back end of the design process today, we're going to see that we have a pack that's going to the client. These are the client-facing big set piece events of our design process. And they have a primary function and they have secondary functions. So our primary function is the main purpose that the pack serves, but we also have to be mindful of any secondary functions that that pack needs to perform at the point that it's delivered. So this is how we apply the intent framework to our systems and processes. So last time I showed you a timeline, a very long scrollable timeline that goes off for miles, that breaks the design process down as defined by both REBA and the BIID. So we have all of our different stages of design, and we have a horizon. So it's this thin line that you can see. I've overlaid it here with red. Everything above the line that I show you today is client facing. The client sees. So the stuff above the line is visible to the client. The stuff below the line, the client never sees. This is under the bonnet of your business. These are the specifications, the templates, the spreadsheets, the documents that you need to have operationally to successfully run a design project and to handle your clients. So we have what the client sees, what the client doesn't see, and then ultimately at the very bottom of the sheet, you can see the stage of the design process based on the REBA plan of work. So that's the timeline, and it scrolls horizontally from pre-engagement all the way to the end to handover and completion. So we're covering the entire design process. Now, last week I also mentioned, I'm sorry, I'm going to wrap up with last week in a minute, very soon, a possible alternative approach to fee proposal, because I'm seeing this increasingly and it's helping manage clients perhaps in the moment. And we had a very interesting conversation with some design. I had a interesting conversation with some designers last week talking about how AI is actually interfering in the design process with clients using AI to critique our outputs, to perhaps take early stage design work and think that they could complete the project themselves using AI with early stage work. We're seeing all kinds of new challenges to our work coming through as clients become AI assisted. So historically, I have recommended we do discovery and feasibility. We then produce a fee proposal. The fee proposal would give a client a vision of the entire back end of the project. They would know what they were in for. You know, different people have different ways of calculating it, but we calculate the whole thing and present it to the client. What I am seeing now from some designers, and it seems to be working quite well in the current market, is two fee proposal stages. We have prep and concept under a fixed fee is presented for fee proposal one, and the designer is hopefully quite transparent about the likely shape of the back end, but they don't commit to a fee for the remainder of the project. They do the concept first. Once the concept is in the bag, we've got a much better idea of where the project is headed, and that enables the designer then to come up with a second fee proposal. So I spoke about this at greater length in the last presentation. I just wanted to remind you, for those of you who didn't see that, that you can go back and watch that. So we're now in Systems and Processes Part 2. I've more or less done the introduction. We're going to move on and look at the second half of the timeline. Now, we got up to the end of concept. We're stepping back in now with developed design. And pretty soon, what has been under our control as the designer is going to start introducing other professional people, collaborators into the job. So we've managed everything up till now. Once we get to tender and we move on into the build element of a design project, we start introducing things that are outside of our control. And the client management part is going to become even more important. So there's going to be a shift as we progress through the back end of the timeline. We're going to be looking at the four remaining big set piece packs, packs 6, 7, 8, and 9. And I'm going to talk about some potential points of jeopardy. Some points in the back end of the timeline where everything's been going along really nicely, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a problem. There's a problem with the client. And we can start thinking about why those problems might manifest in the back end of the timeline. So I'm going to talk to you about three concepts around construction, a change management situation, and then we'll finish up with the white label studio and Q&A at the end. So as I said, our first half of the timeline was largely about design. We were the professional. We sculpted it. We framed it. We put it together. We presented it to the client, and now we have been doing our design work, and everything has been under our control. So part one covered the work of bringing a client into the project, building the relationship, establishing trust, winning commitment to a design direction. Every document in the first half of the timeline is in some form a piece of persuasion or expectation setting, preparing the client for what is to happen. So that is the first half of the timeline. Now we are moving into inviting others to come and join us in this project. We're actually having to manage the situation more. So part two covers something harder, accompanying a client through an experience that is, by design, disruptive, unfamiliar, and can be really long. So the documents in the second half are less about selling and more about holding. the discipline changes and the systems are going to change with it. And we'll look at how we can do that best. We are going to be moving from persuasion, inform, and we're coming much more into managing the client. So in this half, we're going to have much more client management element built into the parts. So this is the continuation of the timeline. We spoke about up to the end of concept in the previous presentation, and we're now picking it up in develop design. We can see above the line what the client is seeing, and we'll look at the develop design presentation, the materials and finishes in a moment. Behind the scenes, we've taken the concept that the client had approved, and now we are turning that into a real proposition. We're turning it into drawings, we're turning it into materials. We are putting together an actual real manifestation of the concept with specified items that we're going to present to our client. So this is the develop design stage. And the two big set piece things that could actually be one presentation, this isn't necessarily two presentations, it could be one, are going to be develop design, the presentation of drawings, planning, lighting, that kind of thing, and the materials and finishes. Excuse me. So at the point that we produce Pack 6, develop design, this is a gear change. We're moving from the emotional, the lovely swelling emotion of the concept, and we're actually starting to pin things down for real. So we're coming into a period of analytical confidence. We want to inform our client, to show them the work. The concept is becoming an actual building. We need to persuade them because we're trying to sell in the stuff that we have created for them based on the joint vision, the communal vision that we have for the project. And we also need to anchor them. We need to get their approval so that we can go forward and actually get into procurement and the technical detail of the design itself. So both the develop design and the materials and finishes pack, which actually shows the materials and finishes, they're designed to manage the client, to make their decisions, to persuade the client to go with the scheme, and to manage them through any uncertainty that they have based on the prospect for change. Because change management, the the anxiety that people can feel when they're, confronted with doing something in a different way or home looking different. We have to sort of help them with that process and also help them see that they might have those feelings. So this is what we're dealing with when we present these two presentations. Now, the client hopefully is persuaded, perhaps there are a few revisions made, and the client gives you approval to proceed. And with this, we move into technical design. So the client has said yes. They're very happy with the look and the feel of the thing, with the items that you're beginning to specify. But up until now, we hadn't really done things like detailed working drawings. We hadn't produced the schedules and specifications because we didn't want to get into that level of detail until the client had given us their approval. Well, we now have the approval for the design, so now we need to produce all of the support material, the support documentation that is going to allow those other collaborators to share our vision and to make it real exactly as we've designed it. So we're specifying in detail the design that we've created so that other people can turn it to manifest it for real. So behind the scenes, we're doing detailed working drawings, we're producing schedules and specifications. We've held off from doing this because we didn't want to specify a project that hadn't been approved yet, but the client has approved it. Here at the very bottom, in green, we see the procurement track, because at this stage, we could start making purchases. We've specified what it is that we're going to provide for the client, we could start buying. I'm going to deal with procurement separately. So we have a separate presentation coming up. I've taken the whole of procurement out and we're going to look at that in isolation. So let's leave procurement for now. Once we have completed all of our detailing, all of our schedules and specifications, we are now able to provide the client with firm, detailed pricing, the actual cost of this project. So previously we gave them an indication, now we are confirming it in writing. Um, and we are doing that because we're pulling in from our suppliers estimates from our suppliers on the costs of supply of the products that are turning up in the specifications and schedules. So all of this pricing information is becoming real. So we are now in a position to produce the full project investment. And this is where potentially we're getting into a financial gap. So we're potentially, depending on how well you estimated in the concept stage, there might now be a difference between what you estimated and the actual price that it's coming out at. So in stage two concept, we produced an indicative budget. This was a sketch budget based on where the client indicated they were pitched in terms of their investment and the kinds of products that we were thinking of initially to supply for the project. It's quite interesting if there is a gap between the indicative budget and the full investment. How did this happen? It could be that the client has evolved their thinking about the level, the quality that they want implemented in their home. So they might have been more cautious at the beginning. And as you've shown them product, they've become more ambitious in terms of the quality that they would like achieved. You know, they've decided to put a bit more money behind it. So it's quite important to be able to explain to your client if there is a discrepancy, how that discrepancy came to pass. You know, is it because we've upscaled the quality and therefore there's been a commensurate increase in the likely budget for the project? I know when I speak to clients about how much something's going to cost. You know, sometimes a supplier will say, "Oh, I don't know, between 350 and 500 for that thing." I always find it's best when you're reporting that back to the client to err towards the upper end because typically it comes in at the upper end. And if you have overestimated, then it's really nice to be able to give your client some money back at the end of the day, you know, to try to get the indicative as close to the full investment as you possibly can. So much as we might like to tell our client what they think they want, what we think they want to hear, you know, oh, 350 to 500, they're obviously going to be happier at 350. I'll tell them 350. In the long term, you're doing yourself a favor and you're probably doing the client a favor if you know, give them the worst case scenario and then pull back from that. So just something for you to be considering when we're thinking about the indicative budget back in stage two. So the gap is not a failure of estimation, it is the natural consequence of design development. The pack 5, the indicative budget, and pack 8, the full project investment, the pairing, we're designed to sorry, I've got my words muddled up here. We're going to be able to work our way through this, but only if we've been as honest as we possibly could be in stage two. So we want to make sure that we do a good job at stage two, so we don't give ourselves a nightmare when we're doing stage four, when we're handing out pack 8. So our full project investment pack, we are managing our clients' expectations. We need to get this right. There's going to be terms and conditions around this. You know, you are working on estimates that have come in from your suppliers. Those estimates are probably, well, somewhere on the estimate will probably say how good that estimate how long that estimate is good for. So maybe your supplier is guaranteeing the price for 28 days. We have to report that on to our clients. So our clients need to understand that the prices that you're giving them today, as long as they book in the next X period of time, those are the prices that we can generally hold to. What can happen is a client gets an estimate in December. All the companies, all your suppliers put their prices up in January. You can go from December to January and have a 5 or 10% increase in price. So, or a client will go quiet on something that you price for them in April. They'll come back in October, and all of those prices need to be checked again. So we are making sure that our client understands the implications of the pricing and the point at which they need to commit to us in order to be able to be more firm with those prices. So we're managing their expectations, we're informing them, we're helping transform what is a frighteningly large number, a frighteningly big amount of money, into something that they can understand. They understand the value, they understand why things cost as much. So we have a presentation to actually clarify all of that for them so that they can stay with us at this point. And we need to anchor them. So we need to make sure that as part of this presentation, there is a call to action and that we are ensuring that the client is going to give us permission following this presentation to move on and start with procurement. So we're looking for authorization agreement to come out of this presentation. Okay, now this is the point, the contractor is appointed. This is the point at which a lot of the control of the project slips out of your hands and where our client management skills are going to come into their own. So we move into the build program. We are attending site. I've put here charged by the hour. Typically, that's what I think most clients that I work with for site visits are charging by the hour. That way, when a project overruns, you're still being paid for your routine attendances on site. We're going to talk about the weekly updates that we share with the client at this point. Behind the scenes, we might be dealing with CDM, design management, construction design management legislation. I'm not going to talk about CDM today, but we can talk about it some other time. But you need to know for the purposes of the project, the role that you have been assigned through construction design management legislation. I think it's a 2015 act. And it assigns different responsibilities to different people within the project, and you absolutely have to understand what your role is going to be as part of this project. So if you something for you to research, or we can talk about it another time. You're producing minutes of the meetings. Potentially, it might not be you. It could be an architect, or maybe there's a project management manager. Someone is producing minutes of the monthly meetings, along with actions for all of the parties who were present at the meeting. You might be producing installation information. That's probably coming from the procurement track. And you might be billing at the end of this stage, depending on how you've structured the charging of your fee broken down across the stages of design. We're going to look at procurement on another occasion. So here I want to talk to you specifically about client management, because this is where client management is going to come into its own. And I've got 4 ideas around this. And the first idea is the idea of the wilderness, because without deliberately designed waypoints, at this stage, your client is entering the wilderness. And that is a formless middle period during which anxiety accumulates, boredom sets in, and the designer becomes perhaps the only available target for frustration that is really about time and uncertainty. Now, sometimes you are just the nicest person who's around, and therefore you're the person that people vent at. So, but this can be managed. Now, I previously, when I was at KLC, I did a year's teacher training to get my PG cert. And one of the things I learned in teacher training was when I came back and I was planning a 10-week term. So KLC, we ran 3 10-week terms. I was planning a 10-week term. There is no way I would put a student in week one, give them a project, and have that project run for 10 weeks. We would lose half the student body in a term that looked like that. Human beings become bored, anxious, they lose their motivation when they can't see either the beginning of a process or the end of a process. And I found it's well known as a teacher that you really don't want to dump somebody in something that is more than about 4 weeks duration without giving them some kind of marker point, without making them feel like the end, the beginning, they can still see the beginning in the rear view mirror or the end is coming up. So we manufacture waypoints as teachers. We make sure that we do things in digestible chunks. So perhaps your waypoints are the end of the first fix, or plastering is complete, or the kitchen installation, but you can see how you can break a big project down into lots of little mini projects and keep the client's motivation and make them feel like progress is being made. We're going to talk about the weekly updates that we give the client, but this imposes a rhythm. We have a rhythm on the project. The rhythm is reliable. It comes out the same time every week, and it imposes structure on something that can feel endless or out of control. And we preempt their anxiety. So we take a little bit of time to think about how they must be feeling, and we make sure that we tell them in advance that they're going to feel this way. We recognize how they're feeling. Perhaps if they do have some wobbles, we help ourselves to understand those wobbles because we know how they're feeling. And that way the client can have more faith and trust in us because we are on, we see things that are going to happen before they happen. So another concept here is the concept of the map. And this is a bit like, I don't know, if you're in a theme park and it's a massive theme park covering acres and acres and acres, and it's got this world and that world and the other world, and you look at the map and you're completely lost. What you really want is a tiny little marker that says you are here. You have that, the client doesn't. So if the client is inexperienced, maybe it's their first renovation, they're struggling with the shock of their building reduced just to a facade, there are delays that we all knew would probably happen at some point, but we didn't know what it would be and when it would happen. There are the perceived scale changes. So you walk into a freshly plastered room, there's no furniture in there. It looks tiny. How can this be the sitting room? Where is the furniture going to go? Minutes before your project is finished, it looks at its worst. You get 95% of the way through, and it still looks like the end is nowhere in sight. We know this, but the client doesn't. So we hold it. We've seen it all before. We carry the map that the client cannot see. And the weekly update shares enough to keep the client oriented. The designer's specific and irreplaceable contribution is to transfer peace of mind to the client. That's a big part of your role. So we are deep in client management with expectations and relationship. So I want to come back to these routine weekly client updates. They are not one of the 9 big packs, but actually they are a critical part of the design process as experienced by the client. So our routine weekly client update, if we can train our client that at X o'clock on a particular day of the week, they know that they are going to receive a comprehensive update from us. And this is something I'm going to be talking to you about for AI applications in your business. I'm sure those of you using AI, you'll see exactly how this could work. We can hopefully stop the client from needing to send us endless WhatsApps in the middle of the night, because we can train them into this rhythm. We can keep them trained in this rhythm. So, the emotional weather at this point is what the client really wants to know. Is my project progressing as it should? Is my designer on top of it? So, this is what we are responding to before the client needs to ask the question. We need to be calm, informative, brief, like a reassuring hand on a shoulder. If there is bad news, if something occurs on site, you want to be the person to tell the client. You don't want someone else getting in first. You want to be immediately on the phone to the client or meeting them in person. It's not an email. It's always a phone call or an in-person meeting when something bad happens, and you make that call as soon as you possibly can. And the reliability of this process, the rhythm of it, is a form of professionalism. So these weekly updates are being sent to the client at exactly the same time on exactly the same day. They help manage the relationship, they manage the client's expectations, and they help the client manage change. And I wrote a big blog post on change management a couple of weeks back. It's fascinating, the psychology, the different theories of psychology that play into change management as they affect our clients is a really interesting read. Now, I think Sarah is here today. Sarah, I saw your post on Instagram this week or last week when you were talking about styling, and it really resonated. So, styling. So, this final element that is the small details, the things that the clients think are dispensable. So, I don't know, lampshades, throws, cushions, the lovely details that in their own right can be a little bit expensive, but without them, the project is incomplete. So, selling in styling is something that you need to do at the very beginning of the project. And if we can, I was going to say conceal, but obviously we are completely transparent. But if we can wrap the cost of styling into the project overall so that the client pays for it as part of a larger check covering a chunk of the project, so they aren't seeing, the small additional cost that's coming. Styling is a major part of expectations management, because your client has hired an interior designer. They expect to have a beautiful, even, they're already expecting beautiful. We have to exceed or surpass their expectations. And the styling pack is such an important part of this end of the project. So a project is at its most disappointing when it's at about 95%, because pretty much everything is there, and yet it doesn't really look fantastic. It's not because anything has gone wrong, but it's because the finishing layer that transforms a completed building into a designed interior has not yet been applied. So I don't know if this is relevant in systems and processes, but it's something that really resonated with me in the last couple of weeks. And I think it's a very important part that you sell hard to the client, because if you don't put it in, the client may well be disappointed. The experience is not going to live up to their expectations. So at 95%, a project is always darkest just before dawn. We all know it, you go to site and we say, how much longer, how much longer, how much longer? And the answer is always, I don't know, 2 weeks. But when it really is 2 weeks, it often doesn't look any better than it has done for the last 3 months. So always darker before dawn. We need to help our clients through that. We need to explain that that's going to happen. We need to reassure them. We need to let them know that when they've spent all their money and they've been through all of this pain, if the last few details haven't arrived, it isn't going to look just so yet. So we help them to know what they're going to see at 95%. We explain what the styling does. And this is a change management argument. It's about expectations. It's not even about sales. It's like, it's not for me that I'm trying to sell you this thing. This is important for you. So, we're working hard on getting that final piece in. Now, here's another change management aspect of our systems and processes. Um, I call it the meaning gap. So a new space arrives with no emotional resonance. It's empty. It doesn't matter how perfect it is, it's got no history. It cannot carry the weight of an old property. The home that you lived in previously has so much emotional resonance. And the change, the way that we experience change is our brain gets accustomed to our environment, and in the end it stops seeing it because we know where that chair is, we know where that table is, we know what it looks like, and as long as it looks exactly like it always has done, our brain doesn't really pay any attention. But as soon as we change something, our brain starts noticing. And we prefer to use our brains for other things. We'd really rather not to have waste braining on our environment. And so when our brain has to start noticing changes, it feels to us like discomfort. And that feels bad. So it doesn't matter if the thing looks better, it can feel worse. And this is the whole change management piece. So I'm talking probably here more about properties, and this is where you should draw a distinction. If your client has bought a new property, they've never lived in it, they don't have the relationship with the old property, they're not going to experience loss as part of the project, then this is not so significant. But if what you're doing is helping a client renovate a beloved home where they've raised a family that has all kinds of landmark moments have been experienced in the previous iteration of the property, then the loss for the client is real. And this is something we need to help our clients manage them through. The transition is not a failure. However, the client might assume, because of the way that change makes them feel, that there has been some form of failure. So psychological adjustment can take days or weeks. It's always best to let a client know that this might happen and to tell them that likely outcome is that in a week or 10 days, they will have overcome this transition. And that's the time to start thinking about how they feel about their new environment. And so you can help close this gap by scheduling in a review of the situation with your client a week or two later to talk about how they're really feeling about the new environment. But change management is a very important part. So we then have completion and snagging. We're walking our client through the property. Hopefully, we've produced a snagging list by ourselves without the client having to point out the various elements of the project that need improvement or finishing, completion. But we walk our client through the situation, we confirm the snagging list. There is then a snagging period, and eventually we get to the point where everybody is happy that the project has been delivered at the desired standard. We then have handover and aftercare, and I'm going to talk to you about the final pack, that is the ninth pack, which is the handover pack, which is going to the client. Now, this is fixing the record, this is closure. This is fixing the record of the project. It's perhaps giving the client the guarantees to go with products that have been installed or maintenance. So it's helping the client it's like helping the client to understand how to run their new home. It's helping them through that emotional transition again. And it is the last opportunity that you have really to help your client to feel great about the fact that they appointed you. So this is our last sort of formal moment with the client. It's the last formal document that's going to land with them. So we have to put a great deal of care into it because it's going to be the lasting memory. And here we have a rule that is the peak end rule, which says that the two parts of the project that the client will remember is the peak, which was the point at which the project was most emotionally intense, and that could be good or it could be bad, but they will remember the project because of the most emotionally intense period, and they will remember the end. Now, there are some theories that suggest that in our business, we should occasionally mess up because how we retrieve the situation can actually make us more trustworthy, can make the client appreciate us more because we've done really well at fixing something that has gone wrong. So at the end of the project, there is the opportunity for us to retrieve, for us to polish, for us to make a great lasting impression with the client. So snagging, walking the client through the space, handing over the space, these are the memories that are going to outlast the things potentially that happen during the build. A beautifully managed completion consolidates months of trust. So, we've been through a war with these clients potentially. They're like comrades in a military campaign. Hopefully, we are closer, there's more trust because we want a designed ending to this. We are designers and we're designing the end just as we've designed every other element of the project thus far. And we want our design for the end to leave the client feeling warm and feeling inclined to refer us on to future clients. To which end we might have some form of post-project review with our client. Now, this is not a pack. This could be a conversation, it could be a cup of coffee, it could be a lunch or however you want to manage it, but it's an opportunity for you to reflect on the project, to discuss how it went, for your client to give you feedback, and then hopefully, not in a contrived way, but just as part of the conversation, to encourage the client to think that they might recommend you on to other connections. So, part of leaving a good impression. Now, oh, there was something I was going to say here and I've completely forgotten. Anyway, post-project review. Oh, it'll come back to me. The best possible ending, lasting satisfaction for the client with the relationship. The formal ending, closure, ending the project with the client, and then hopefully a little bit of selling, persuading the client that we would be a good person to recommend onwards to their friends or relations or neighbours or whatever. Okay, so that is the conclusion of part two. And across the two presentations, we have looked at the complete design process timeline. So that has been across the slides that I have shown you. We've spoken about the purpose of the documentation that we've produced for our client in order to match the likely mindset of the client at the point that that documentation is dropping on them. We've looked at the 9 client-facing document packs, plus a couple of important additions. And I've also spoken to you more extensively in the first presentation about how you might be thinking about crafting your fee proposals because there are alternative ways to do that. And we've also spoken about client management, managing their emotional journey as they go. So that is what we've dealt with in 1 and 2. Next week, on Thursday, 2nd of July, 12 noon, I'm going to talk specifically and exclusively about procurement. And that will be recorded, but it will be live here on the Hothouse link as well. And then a week later, for those of you who attended the BIID, I'm going to be doing a similar presentation to the presentation that I did a couple of weeks ago now for the BIID on implementing AI into your systems and processes. Now, I have to say that that AI presentation is going to land better with people who are using AI and who feel comfortable with it. Okay, it's not advanced, it's intermediate, but it will expect that you have got a working level of experience with AI. So that is coming up in 2 weeks' time. So we've got those to come. Now, the reason, or one of the things that I'm up to at the moment is I've told you I'm producing a course, a self-directed course that is going to launch in September, and it's called White Label Studio, and it is just about the systems and processes of the interior design practice. So it's going to cover in detail everything that we have discussed in these last two, and indeed the coming two presentations. So what it is the entire interior design process along a timeline. We know we've got all the client-facing stuff above the line. We've got all the behind-the-scenes stuff below the line. The course is going to include all of that. I'm working with an architect and graphic designer to produce 9 beautiful templates that are pre-formed, ready for you to drop in your branding, your logo, and so on. They are all based on the intent framework that we've discussed, and they are the 9 packs that you need to send to your clients. So they will all be part of the course. Behind the scenes, every spreadsheet, specification, estimate, invoice, purchase order, all the procurement stuff, the running the project stuff is going to be included in the form of Word documents and Excel documents. So the client's facing stuff will be InDesign, Canva, PowerPoint, both for screen and for print. The stuff behind the scenes will probably be mostly Microsoft Office, which will be Word and Excel. And this will all be presented as part of a course that talks you through the entire process from start to finish and includes everything that you need to run it. And it's going to have an entire organization system of folders to show you exactly where to store all of this stuff. So that's coming in September. Now because I am funding the development of this course, I'm doing a special offer upfront that finishes at the end of June for anybody who'd like to get in at a lower price, and that will help me with the costs of development. So the lower price offer closes on the 30th of June, and it's £350 for the whole thing, but delivery will be in September when the course launches. That offer ends at the end of June. Alternatively, I know that I have some new designers here who are interested in my Business in a Box course, which runs live in September for 12 weeks. This is for designers who have not yet launched or who are in the very early stages of running their business. Their business. Now, Business in a Box covers planning your business, getting your marketing up and running, launching your business, getting you started. It's 12 weeks live. You can find out about it on my website, but it also comes with White Label Studio built in. So you will get the whole of White Label Studio if you sign up for Business in a Box. So those are the two ways to get it, and they are both via my website, which is Recipe for a Room. If you go onto the courses page, you can see both of those courses on offer. Okay, so there's the website. It's up on the courses bit. It's Recipe for a Room, and you can get the 350 White Label Studio, which will either be £500 from July onwards, or Business in a Box, which is currently on an early bird offer. So there endeth the advert. I am going to stop sharing the presentation, and I'm going to invite anybody who'd like to chat about that gallop. So does anybody have any questions or comments? Timna, yes, please.
Sorry, jumping in, not so much about the presentation, but about the White Label Studio, the
Yes.
350. Does it, do you think it would still be appropriate for commercial projects, or do you think it is very much geared to residential? I mean, obviously a lot of this is much more about the kind of hand holding for private resi, and I don't know whether I'm kind of trying to shoehorn one type of work into another, or whether actually even taking out the personal emotional stuff, a lot of what you say is really relevant still because, you know, commercial clients are still people, they're still human, they still have
Yeah.
budgets, they still have homes and issues going on outside of work and stuff that,
See, my problem is I am a residential interior
mm,
designer and I don't have that commercial experience. So I sort of don't know what it's missing in that respect. What I can tell you is I imagine, I know a schedule is a schedule, a specification is a specification, a Gantt chart is a Gantt chart. The processes are very similar.
yeah,
But in terms of things like fee proposals, how, because it was going to have all of that stuff in it as well, how you would structure a fee proposal for a commercial client would be a bit different. Um,
mm,
so I would imagine that probably it's like a 70% overlap or an
mm,
80% overlap. But I'm sorry, I don't think I can really answer that question because I don't, I'm ignorant of the extra bit that you would have for the commercial project.
sure. Thank you for
Julia,
that.
Yeah. Yes.
Julia, and if you use SD and that sort of thing, because I use SD for lots of things, is it still, is it, what do you think?
Well, I haven't even covered procurement yet.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
no, no, no. But Sarah, I imagine, do you know, I absolutely, I don't want, I just hear so much really good stuff about programmer. And I think we've spoken about this in our group. Um, and I would imagine that programmer would take away quite a lot of the procurement stuff. So, to up to date, we haven't spoken about procurement. The whole procurement part is a separate part. I do think it's helpful to know how to run it, but then you know how to run it because you've done it for years. Um, so I think programmer would cover bits of it, but not all of it. I'm sorry, Sarah, I can't make a, you know,
No, the question was really more if all your documents were based in Excel.
oh, I see. I beg your pardon. Yes, they're based. Yes. So everything I'm going to share that is behind the scenes is Excel and Word.
Sorry, I've got an unstable internet.
Yeah.
So,
Everything behind the scenes is Microsoft Office, which of course can then be converted into Google Docs or could be converted into Pages or Numbers if you're on Mac.
Thank you.
Julia,
And
can I ask a question? Because I
Yeah.
also use SDPC and I'm also contract, as you know. So with your Excel spreadsheets, is that where you're logging your procurement? I know you're going to cover that next week, but that's
Yeah.
where you're logging everything that you're buying and you've got
Yes.
formulas built in and things like that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So the idea being you don't need additional software.
Exactly. Yes. So I mean, I know Russell from I know Estimac and I know what it does. And this is
Mm.
the spreadsheets that us it doesn't do what Estimac does. Estimac is obviously a particular piece of software that does stuff automatically. But these are if you were running it for yourself and you didn't want to bring in any other system, you could run the whole thing off the stuff that's in the course.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. It's just whether, am I going to be paying for something that I've already got? But obviously, I think there's going to be so much more in there. Um, just going back to Timna's point, because obviously I'm doing all commercial work now. I was kind of thinking, well, all the processes are the same. You do still, to a certain degree, have to take your client on that same emotional journey. Because, like Timna said, they are still people at the end of the day. Farmers and landowners will never have done this before, and they're used to dealing with fields and animals. So, they're going to need very much a hand-holding process as much as any other residential client would. So, is it possible to kind of like, I know you don't want to share the documents themselves, but is it possible to kind of like give like headlines for what's in
Yeah.
each pack? That
Yes.
would be really helpful to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I will. I'll put some more information together. I'm sorry, it's early stage, and I
Mm.
know it's a big ask to sort of buy something without looking at it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I have business reasons for what I'm doing, and I'm sorry that it's because I actually need to start talking about business in a box, and I have
Yeah.
to some extent I have to park White Label Studio and pick it up again later in the year when it's ready to
Okay.
launch.
Yeah. I mean, I'm because I'm keen to do it, but I
Yeah,
want to know if I'm committing
yeah,
now,
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
obviously before the end of June. Um, so yeah, it'd just be nice to have a better
yeah,
idea
So,
within the next
yeah,
week,
yeah.
if
same
at
for
all
me.
possible.
Okay, I will do that. It was my plan. I'm planning to work on it in the next few days anyway, so I will do that.
Thank you.
But yes.
Yeah,
Um,
I know you're busy.
okay. Any questions about systems and processes?
Sorry, I had to jump in one more time, and it was
Yeah.
just to do with the beginning. You were talking about in concept design when you give an indicative budget.
Yes.
Do you, I mean, when you call it an indicative budget, is it just you're making suggestions of sort of design details and certain elements that you've got an idea roughly fit into that? Or do you, because I don't give a budget, I don't really give price, I give ideas that fit within their ballpark, but I don't necessarily break it down.
Yeah. So some I've got a spreadsheet that goes room by room. So it goes like sitting room, dining room, kitchen, living room, yada, 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 yada. And then it's got every piece of furniture that you might have in those rooms. It's got, you know, um, you put in how many square meters floor area there is, you put in the ceiling heights, it calculates how many coats of paint you need, how many rolls of wall. Actually, I'm lying. You probably have to do your own wallpaper calculation. Um, but so it starts to pin down roughly how much a house, a residential property, is going to cost to produce an entire FF&E budget, um, including curtaining by the linear meter, all of that. And you can put in roughly what the cost per meter fabric is going to be. And to some extent, you can adjust that depending on whether it is your low range, your mid range, your high range, because clients might have different expectations. And that would allow you to give your client a ballpark figure for roughly what they might be getting into in terms of investment. Because in the early stages of the project, we really don't know. But if we're experienced, we have some idea of how much a principal room costs per square meter, for example. So it's at that level, based on the brief that the client has given you. And if the brief is, modest and inexpensive, then and they change that, then obviously that's where you can get into a disparity between stage 2 and stage 4. Does that answer it, Timna?
Yes, it does. I just thought it was interesting because I thought the way, I mean, that gap is crucial. Between the indicative budget and then when you actually get the prices in, and it is difficult to manage. So I was just curious when you said you give an indicative budget concept. I was wondering whether you communicate that in a sort of
Yeah, I
structured
mean,
way.
I think many of the designers that I work with have got their own
Mm.
square meter cost. So they'll say to a client, your home is 200 square meters. If we design it to this level, that's X per square meter, Y per square meter, or Z per square meter, depending on the level of your ambition. And that's based on historical experience. Or, you know, I'm going to do this anyway. I'm going to put together, I've got the spreadsheet. Um, we can actually work out our own rough ideas of where that's going to land. And that can be the basis for those early concept estimations.
That
Right.
would be helpful actually, Julia, because I had a farmer literally last week say to me, he's considering uh, holiday cottages, and he's done spreadsheets already, and he was talking about like depreciation of furniture, which seemed to put him off. Um, and I'd and he said, oh, well, how much typically would you quote per square meter? And And I just said, I can't just pull a figure out of the air, unfortunately. I said it entirely depends on one, your budget, because how much they are willing to spend, and also the size of the space, at this point, how long is a piece of string? But I do get those questions from time to time. So if it is possible to give them a kind of like indicative
Yeah,
idea, like you say, at low, medium, and high levels.
yeah, yeah.
Like, it's,
Okay,
it's a
that
tricky one because it's always awkward because then it kind of you're standing there and you're really being put on the spot and you kind of go, now I look like I don't know what I'm doing, but it's such a huge thing to pinpoint because then you know that they'll hold you to it as well.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, well, we've got an accountability meeting coming up on Friday. I know you can't attend this week,
Probably
but I
not.
think we might play a game of high, medium, and low. And
That's a great
Sarah,
idea.
yes, excellent. Okay. And I'll get
I've got
some.
a similar sheet where I've got, yeah,
Yeah,
high, medium,
okay.
low.
So, and then I can use, if you don't mind, I'll use that information to make a spreadsheet and then we can share that. So,
Thank you.
yeah, okay.
Julia, can I ask, going back to the beginning of your presentation when you were talking about different, almost structuring it slightly differently, doing your fixed fee, going back to the concept, how much are you envisaging goes into the concept?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
had
the almost like drawing up the,
yeah,
we
yeah,
always front end a project with going and drawing up all the rooms and stuff and doing
yeah,
in plan and stuff. Actually, that's an awful lot of work if you're not going to then carry it through.
yeah, yeah.
How much do
So,
people do?
okay, different designer would say deliverables. So, what are the deliverables for the concept stage? Different designers would have different deliverables. Okay, you specify the deliverables. So, how far do you want to take it? I know designers who would even have spatial planning in the concept. So, they would have materials, style. They might have a sketch joinery to show the style of joinery. What's not detail working drawings or even elevations, just a sketch to show the style of the joinery. There might be a couple of hero pieces that work their way in, the color palette. So we don't know what the sofa is. We don't know what the wallpaper is. We haven't chosen the fabrics. But we know the kinds of patterns we like. We know the kinds of colors we like. We know the style we're going for. Um, you work in quite a distinct style anyway, Sarah. So someone working with you would have that in mind. So we design the deliverables. Now, I was talking to a client about this last week, and we agreed that we might pull 10% of the design fee into the concept. So, but we need to make sure that we've actually priced the time. So we have our deliverables. We know how long we're going to spend to get to that pack of deliverables. We make sure that against our hourly rate, we've covered our hourly rate definitely. That part of the project is going to come off the final design fee because we're doing it up front, but it is part of the design fee. When I was speaking to her about it, I was saying that I expected that to be maybe 10 or 20% of the total design fee. Um, so if a design fee for a property was going to be 30 grand, then the concept bit might be 3 to 6 grand. But I could even see concept going up to, 8 to 10 grand, depending on how much you pull forward to concept. Now, I'm think I'm being what is it, sensationalist here. I think I'm fear mongering, but I do worry that a bit like kitchen designers used to get, where people would get a kitchen designer to make a free plan, and then they try and get the free plan off the kitchen designer and take it to Magnet and get Magnet to build the thing for them. I could see people thinking that if they could get an interior designer to come up with a concept, they could do the rest of it themselves in AI. So I'm trying to think, it's a bit like the moment that we experienced 20 years ago when the internet meant that we could no longer protect retail pricing. That people could actually see trade prices and they could buy things themselves. And there was a moment when interior design changed, and it feels like AI potentially brings other similar moments, cliff edges. And I'm concerned about protecting the IP of the concept. And I think if you isolate it and charge for it and make sure that it's been properly paid for, that might be one way. And I'm really not trying to say change the way you work. I'm just reporting that I see designers isolating concept, charging for it as a first stage, not committing to the rest of the fee until the concept is complete, and then choosing to price the rest of the project based on what's been identified at concept stage. Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, it does. It does. I guess I never do it that way. I always price the whole thing and people buy in at the beginning, and then it's just a process going through concept and
Yeah.
the
We
And I
talked
know,
about this on our group, didn't we? We had I've got a smaller group as well, and we talked about exactly this. And someone said they, and I thought it was a fantastic idea, but then, and quite a few people said, "Oh, I already do it like that."
yeah, and I appreciate here today as well. I know there's a north-south divide, and what you can get away with in London can be quite different from the way things work, further north in the country. Carol, I've got you in mind, yes.
No, I want to jump in because I've just won a contract and I've done it that way. And it's basically because it's a full house project. Now, I can't quote for the design development fee because I don't actually know what rooms are going to look like at the moment. So, my stage two is basically I do the full spatial planning throughout, but do it as a concept, not the finished one, because obviously as I start to develop it, I might decide to change something within it, but it's like the top level, shall we say. And then all I do is per room is I don't necessarily set the colours there. I just do it real top level to give them a feel for each one. And then once I know actually what the room configuration is going to look like, then I can actually quote for the next stages. And I'll be honest with you, it's the first time I've done this, but it's worked.
Brilliant. Congratulations. That's lovely.
It's worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually doing it this way, I feel more confident as well.
Yeah, and the client gets the experience of working with you and they
Yeah,
get to understand the value because until you've experienced it, you possibly can't really know what the point is. So,
yeah.
yeah, excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, where are we? Gosh, so I did say I thought these would be longer sessions, and I think those longer sessions will continue because I imagine procurement, oh my God, there's so much to talk about. Um, so I think probably for the next two, I would suggest we allow an hour again, plus some time for Q&A. And they will be recorded. I realise I'm launching the dates for them at short notice, but I wanted to get them in before the summer holidays because I know, the field is going to start to thin out a bit. So lovely to see you all. Thank you all for coming along. And I'll see some of you later in the week. And I will I'll cook this and shove it up on YouTube and hopefully see you in the coming weeks. Thank you all very much.
thank you.
Thanks so much, Julia.
Okay,
Thanks, Julia.
bye.